of me. I think Stephanie is going to be a welcome change from listening to me droning on. They've already had me on this morning, only an hour ago. So I will try and talk as little as possible. But I really wanted to introduce you all to Stephanie Fraser. Good morning. Stephanie is the CEO of Cerebral Palsy Scotland, and she's also co-chair of the National Advisory Committee of Neurological Conditions in Scotland. So she is well placed to answer all of your queries and questions, particularly under lockdown and the massive disruption to your lives that we have had, that we're all experiencing, but we are particularly aware that for people living with additional needs or ongoing health worries, this is a particularly concerning time. And Stephanie, look, it says we're live. Sam can see us. Good. Stephanie, thank you very much. You must be rushed off your feet. What is life like under lockdown for someone who's the CEO of a national charity?
Well, all we've found really is that we could see it coming, because we have families and adults and people that come to our centre in Glasgow for therapy, and sort of slightly before lockdown, people started to get really nervous about travelling. There was lots of messages about, washing your hands, being careful, not catching anything. And so people were starting to sort of cancel therapy sessions and things. So we were able to get the heads up and organise, how do we work from home? We're clearly going to have to go and work from home and think about how we help people with cerebral palsy in Scotland in a different way. And so we, at the beginning, we were desperately trying to sort of work out how people could work from home. And, we've met for the last year, we've been trying to organise online therapy sessions and consultations through a system that the NHS have called Attend Anywhere or Near Me. It's come from Australia, but, they've been rolling it out in Scotland. And what's made me laugh is they've been trying for about the last year, 18 months to get everybody to adapt it. And I think within a few weeks, the world has gone on to that.
Isn't it extraordinary? If you told me a couple of months ago I'd be doing this, I would have said absolutely no way. And in fact, we heard recently that the House of Lords has just had its first online, virtual
I love that. I love that.
They're actually leading the way. They haven't managed it yet in the Commons, but they've managed it in the House of Lords. But, you're absolutely right. It's extraordinary, isn't it? When your hand is forced, it is incredible how everyone's adapted. So are you able to offer a certain amount of online?
Yes. So what we've been doing, I've sort of started calling them lockdown sessions, because obviously what we found is that there's a huge amount of anxiety for people who, very early on, anybody with a neurological condition, and cerebral palsy was named as being vulnerable. And that was a sort of blanket approach. I think the politicians were also desperately trying to sort of work out what advice to give to people when. And so there was this blanket sort of, oh, well, you've got a long-term condition, so therefore you must be vulnerable. And actually what's happened since about the 16th of March, when the government first published its guidelines, that's been refined and refined and refined. So what we've been dealing with is actually, what is the situation for somebody with CP? Are you more vulnerable to cerebral palsy? And the answer is, it's like everything with CP, it depends. It depends on your type of cerebral palsy. And actually taking people through that and sort of, sort of dissecting the advice has been very important and taken up a huge amount of time, and I think is really, really important for people.
There was a lot of confusion, wasn't there, about this letter. Are you, should you be shielding, or are you vulnerable? And I've seen online a lot of parents and carers very confused about which they are, which they should be, waiting for a letter that never comes. Would you just explain for anyone who might not understand this, what is the difference, and what should you do if you think you should have a letter and you haven't had a letter? Just a little bit more about that, because I know I'm confused and I've been desperately trying to make sense of it.
Well, I mean, basically it all comes from the fact that at the very beginning of all the COVID-19 stuff, policymakers and the NHS and everybody were desperately trying to identify who would be the most affected, who would be really vulnerable, and they cast their net really wide. So basically, that's where they came up with the flu jab group. So they basically, the quickest way to sort of say it to everyone was that if you are eligible for a winter flu jab, then you're probably vulnerable to COVID. But that was a very broad brush. So, and a lot of people were covered by that. I mean, I get a flu jab every year, but I am no more vulnerable than anybody else to COVID-19.
Yeah. So it was that sort of alarmist. So
that was the alarmist bit.
Yeah.
That was the alarmist bit. And even more alarming for our population was that they did name anybody with a neurological condition, and particularly, that includes MS, Parkinson's, and cerebral palsy. So that was fine. That was sort of knee-jerk reaction to say to people, take this thing seriously. But you have to remember that was way back in mid-March. And then about a week to 10 days later, the Association of British Neurologists refined their advice, and they published some advice. And their advice, by the way, this is all on our website. It's all on the Cerebral Palsy Scotland website.
Right, that's really useful. And we will link in at the end of this live. So if anyone wants to find more, there's a huge amount of information. I had a look this morning on your website. So
there's a specific COVID bit, so you can go through the motions.
But a lot of the advice is relevant for anyone, not only living with CP. There's a lot of advice in there.
Absolutely.
For anybody.
And yes, no, and we've tried to break down this timeline because so you had the Association of British Neurologists who refined the government's advice, if you see what I mean, and they were kind of saying, look, it depends where you are in your condition. So that was the first sort of trying to say, just because you have a neurological condition, we don't know. We don't know enough about COVID. We know it's a respiratory issue, and it causes respiratory issues. So if you have respiratory issues, then you need to be worried. So and take quite serious precautions. So that was sort of next step. And I, what's been quite interesting is this has been a pan UK bit of work. This hasn't been a group of neurologists in Scotland or a group of neurologists in London or whatever. It has been an absolute pan UK sort of pulling together of advice. And then the next step was that the chief medical officers of the 4 nations, so again, pan UK planning, got together to say, look, we need to actually identify who are the clinically most vulnerable, so that
now they know more about the virus, presumably.
Now they know more about the virus.
What it really
means.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that really wasn't until the end of March. And they published a list of anybody with these issues. And it tended to be people on immunosuppressant drugs, those kind of so it wasn't everybody with a flu jab, it wasn't everybody over 70, and it wasn't everybody with a long-term condition. It was a very specific clinical group, and they were the group that they decided needed to be shielded. Now, being shielded at that point at the end of March, by some people it was seen as I need to be shielded because it will give me access to things. And access to things that are really important to people on a daily basis. So things like, the supermarkets were suddenly saying, well, we'll prioritize the shielding group because they can't get out to get online slots. So we ended up with a whole load of people saying, well, I find it very difficult to get out. I am physically impaired. It's really difficult for me to get to the shops. Difficult to queue and to go around. I mean, going to the shops now is not a happy experience in any way.
No. Anyone finds it challenging. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you have a physical disability, of course you find it more challenging. So we had there was a lot of anxiety caused by that. Why haven't I got a shielding letter? Because I am finding it very difficult to get out and about. And then there was, also we were finding people were worried about, well, if I have a long-term condition, should I be going out for my hours exercise every day? you know, and the shielding,
a lot of discussion about this.
Exactly. And the shielding group, we're all told basically, do not leave your gardens if you have one, and if you don't have one, do not leave your house. So, you know, one of the neurologists I work with actually described shielding as draconian. You know, I mean, it's one of those things that you want to say, be careful what you wish for, because actually there are many things about being shielded, which, you know, if you need to be for your health, is very important. But if you don't need to be, actually, it might be more detrimental to your well-being and your long-term good health.
And those of everyone around you who simply don't have to shield with you, an entire household without a garden. It's really, really challenging. Yeah, you wouldn't wish that on anyone.
And it's likely to be for a very long time. So anyway, so the letters started coming out in sort of end of March, beginning of April, and the confusion came because a lot of people, the letters came out in batches. I mean, everybody thinks that central government, I think, can wave a magic wand, or the NHS can wave a magic wand and everything's very efficient. And I can assure you from the inside, you know, it's a very, very different
Especially at the moment, I imagine everyone is just scrambling to, you know, government's so different.
No, and the one thing I do want to reassure everybody is that, you know, from my experience during this, everybody is genuinely trying to do their best. You know, a month and a half ago, most of the people working on COVID were not working on COVID. They were doing other jobs, and they've all been pulled together to sort of deal with this national, nay, international crisis. And they're all doing their best. They absolutely accept that they're not going to get it 100% right 100% of the time. And things will take time to sort of come out in the wash, if you see what I mean. And the shielding is one of those examples, because, you know, there are lots of people. So in Scotland, for example, the MND charities, so people with motor neurone disease, have been sort of saying, why haven't we all got shielding letters? And it's back to just because you have a diagnosis of MND, you may not wish to be shielded. You may not wish to be shielded for very good reasons. So, for example, you know, if you are in the last 6 months of your life, you do not want to be prevented from seeing loved ones necessarily. Similarly, if you're very early on in your diagnosis, you know, you may not be at a stage where actually respiratory issues are causing you problems. So therefore, we don't want to shield people until it's necessary.
Yeah. So really, that's advice. So this is really interesting. So the shielding letter, or shielding status, if you like, is really reserved for those the most vulnerable in a very specific way, which is respiratory. Am I right? That's really
it's not just respiratory. It's also respiratory. It's also things like immunosuppressants and general, you know. Now, what I would say is that if anybody feels that they should be in the shielding category and they haven't received a letter, they should contact their GP.
So that's the route. That was the thing I wanted to ask you. That is the route, is it?
Yeah.
Ask your GP.
Yeah. Ask your GP. So you know, and shielding is a clinical decision. So you know, but if you feel that you should be in that category and you're not, you should ask your GP. But I want to come on to the vulnerable group, because I think the vast majority of people are really in that general vulnerable group. So there's still a huge amount of anxiety there, because people do realize they're vulnerable. And, you know, the most important thing that we're trying to encourage for everybody is to stay as well as possible, because the best thing you can do is to follow all the socially distancing rules and all that kind of, you know, all the guidelines, but to stay as healthy as possible. So, you know, we've been picking up, I mean, just this morning before I came on, I was organizing an online session for a mother whose daughter's community sessions have stopped because, you know, quite a lot of people may have been redeployed. I mean, it depends where you live and who you normally see. And so she wanted to sort of check in for sort of advice for her and her daughter to stay well during this period until community support sort of cracks up again. And, that's the most important thing, is to do what you normally do, keep active, do go outside. I mean, this is sort of evidence emerging, and I do not quote me on this, everybody, but there are anecdotal things about vitamin D helping with COVID. So get outside,
and
be
exercise
active
for your mental well-being as well.
Yes.
I know my daily walk with the dog is absolutely a game changer. It really is important. Yeah.
Well, I'm quite enjoying the fact that we've been told we can have an hour's exercise, because in a funny way, because the government has told me I'm such an obedient person that I actually think, well, I must go outside for my hour's walk.
Keep going.
So I've actually, most of my life I spend in an office or traveling from one meeting to another. So actually I've been taking more walks than I normally do, because I'm not.
And I think we should all try and make a little note somewhere of these things and remember what the good things were that we need to keep in our lives post-lockdown. Yes. And if that is taking more exercise or walking the dog a bit further each day or not rushing around quite so much, there are so many good things emerging out of lockdown, aren't there? We need to just try and hold on to those. I guess one of the things emerging from lockdown, like we touched upon earlier, is the amazing emergence of online care. So if you find it difficult to travel anyway, more access to education, physio, one-to-one sessions and support. Do you think this is going to be a permanent shift? I mean, obviously nothing can replicate one-to-one personal support, and for some of your children and adults that you work with, that's obviously vital. But do you think there's going to be a general shift towards more online services that can also widen the reach of a lot of very stretched services and charities?
Yes, I think you're right. I mean, we are already at Cerebral Palsy Scotland. We're already seeing, for example, we're working with the team in the Western Isles who coincidentally are absolutely brilliant with online consultations, because they've had to be because of their location. So they've absolutely jumped on the fact that we're now on Attend Anywhere and can support them. And, I think that kind of thing will be a permanent change, and very welcome it is too. I mean, as you say, nothing would replace hands-on therapy and actually sort of physical.
Yeah, physical is non-verbal, I guess, in particular. So if they rely on the interaction with someone in the room.
Even for somebody that is non-verbal. So we host during lockdown, we're hosting every Wednesday morning a virtual coffee morning for our adults. So anybody can join it. I mean, frankly, at this moment, it doesn't matter where you actually live, because you can access it on our Facebook page and come and join us. And we have a number of non-verbal adults who join us on Zoom, and we either can use the chat or they can use their devices. And, it's great, actually. And you're right, just keeping those points of contact with people and hearing really how other people are coping and what strategies they've got in place is a really lovely thing. And it's lovely just to know, to touch base with people and know that they are keeping well. And for us, we're hoping that people don't leave it. I mean, I think that's the other thing that services are very worried about, that people are thinking, well, I don't want to bother anybody at the moment. Everybody's so busy and I don't want to bother them, and it's not really very important. And actually, I would encourage everybody to bother their normal services, because, it's the age-old thing that if we can nip something in the bud, then maybe we can prevent something more serious and more long-term when this is all over. And I know there's a big worry about that. There's a big fear about what problems are we storing up.
Yes, I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because I know there is a great fear about taking a child or a vulnerable adult to hospital. So if they fall ill or hurt themselves or whatever it may be in a non-COVID related way, presumably the advice is absolutely take your child to accident and emergency or wherever it may be absolutely as per normal. And just to reassure everyone that the hospitals are doing an amazing job to separate COVID and non-COVID. And that just to really reassure everyone that your child will be safe and sound, and don't not go to hospital because of fear.
No, you're absolutely right. The advice is that if you would normally contact your services for something, then you should not be prevented just because the services might be delivered in a slightly different way. So if you need to go to A&E, go to A&E. But similarly, if you're worried about, if you normally have your medication reviewed, or you normally have an appointment with a consultant, contact them. I mean, what we're finding is that most people are, if it can be done online, for example, a consultant's appointment, it will be done online. But if you're needed to be seen, people are absolutely there to come in and see. And it's the same with carers coming into homes. Again, that's caused a huge amount of anxiety. Should we stop carers coming into home? Now, there are two issues here, actually, because there's the issue that some people's care packages have been reduced, and that's a completely that's a sort of completely different issue, which I can say a lot about if you want. Probably not very polite, but there we go.
Well, it's going to be interesting to hear from you, because obviously that is a very real concern.
But just to deal with people who have carers coming into the home, again, the advice is, it's really important that you stay well. So if you need your carers to come in, you don't want to stop them. You want to make sure that they are absolutely washing their hands, that, if they are providing personal care, they should use, what we all now know as PPE, as usual. And I know that local councils have set up places where people can get PPE if they need it, and they're not able to access it. So, for example, in Scotland, the Scottish Government have published some advice on their website, which we've just put up. We've put up on our website this week, which is advice to carers on personal care and accessing PPE. And, the advice is very much that if you don't have symptoms, your carer doesn't have symptoms, you should carry on as normal. But you should be very stringent about hand washing, about, being socially distant where it is possible. But it is much more important everybody stays well.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, thank you. That's very reassuring advice, because I know there's been a lot of confusion around that. And some people thinking, well, we don't need carers. Technically, we can survive without them. And but then I've heard from people who are now so exhausted because they haven't been sleeping at night, and they're sharing care with their partners, and they have no respite at all. And actually, you need to keep yourselves well as the parents or the carers, a child or an adult you're looking after. You need to look after yourselves as well. So you don't need to be a hero. If the help is on offer, take it as normal. Now we've got a question.
But also, actually, for carers who, for family carers, you're absolutely right. They might, check in with your friends, find the support that's available. Don't feel that you're in this on your own, because there are others going through what you're going through. And, it's really important that you stay well as well. And please check in with services if you need to. If it's all too much, please don't let it overwhelm you.
I know the lack of respite care has really hit lots of families, particularly where there are maybe other siblings and they're used to having a day or two, a week or a month of respite care, and suddenly that's obviously not on offer. And I know that it's having an impact on the wider family as well, and we are very aware of that. So yes, Stephanie's right. Ask for help. Now, I hope this is right, that the question has appeared on the screen in front of you. Fabulous and reassuring advice. It's worth noting that some people with certain respiratory conditions benefit from outdoor activity like walking as part of their chest physio. So Stephanie hit the nail on the head, that confining to your home is disappeared. Confining your home completely may not be the best option. Yes, Stephanie, yeah.
Well, that's the point about not everybody being in this shielding group. So I suppose what I would say is that what we've been working on in Scotland, is how do we help those that are vulnerable but don't have the shielding letter? So which as I say is the vast majority, and actually things that have been, we have a helpline that the government have set up, so those that are vulnerable can ring at the helpline. It's currently only manned 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, but I suspect because they have been having issues with it in the sense of full disclosure, I don't think, I think some people have spent quite a lot of time trying to ring it and not get the answer they want. But
then that rush, and then everything seems to settle down. Leave it a day or two, have another go. Yeah,
they do know about it. But the point about that is that that's somewhere to either connect you into local and community help if you need it, or to fast track you into whatever service NHS you might need, or whatever. It's there for that vulnerable group. The other thing is, I know that some of the advice has changed. So for some people, if it is important to your health that you should be outside, then actually you are allowed to be outside for longer than your requisite hour. So, yes. I mean, I'm thinking of children, particularly families with children with additional needs. I think it came from people with autism saying, it's really important that we have a routine and we are outside and we're not confined to the house. So if being outside, taking exercise and fresh air is important for your well-being, then that is to be encouraged and is allowed. So
I think they've also relaxed the rules slightly. So if you have a child, for example, with autism or ADHD, where they may not be able to understand social distancing, and you need to go slightly further afield to be able to exercise or take your walk somewhere where there are less other people around, for example, then that is okay. I know the rules are very stringent about not driving to go for a walk. You should go for a walk from your home, but that is absolutely okay if it is necessary for you and your child's well-being, safety of others, etc. But again, it's a perfect example of the government updating their advice all the time, because like all of us, they're reacting to circumstances and we're learning all the time. Now, that, by the way, that last question was from, annoyingly, I can't see who the name of the person asking the question, but that was Kerry McPhee, who we did an interview with last night, whose son Ashton has CP and she lives in Scotland, so I'm sure she knows you. This user has said, does that count if you're in a shielded group too? I spoke to someone who's cancelled all of their carers out of fear.
No, even if you are in the shielding group and you have been assessed to require carers, they absolutely should still be coming in. They should be wearing PPE when they are in. But no, I mean, it's probably more detrimental to people's health not to have carers coming in, particularly as this is likely to be a long-term issue. So, I can just keep emphasizing that actually looking after your own well-being is the most important thing you can do. I mean, I'm just picking up another Facebook comment, someone saying, I'm too scared to go out.
I know.
And now I want to share with you a lovely story that happened in the last couple of weeks for us. So, I mentioned we had our adults virtual coffee morning on Zoom. And
someone just said here, just to jump in, she says, I'd love a coffee morning. I'm so fed up right now. It'd be good to talk.
Well, then join us 11 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. Yeah.
We'll share the link. I say Sam will do it because I never work out to do it. We'll share the link. Whoever you are, I wish I knew your name, but absolutely, that's what, there are lots of opportunity for you. You must not ever feel alone. And I'm sure you are fed up. We are all feeling, I think, slightly fed up. I know I have moments as well. So sorry, I was interrupting you about being scared.
Anyway, I was just saying, you're not alone. There are lots of people that feel scared to go out. Anyway, after our first coffee morning, one of our adults actually did go out. She had been scared, and she actually was encouraged to go out as a result of it, because she had spoken to, people in similar situations who were all saying, no, it's, we've been going out and this is what we've been doing and this is where we've been going. And so she actually did start going out. And that was just the most lovely, that's been the best feedback actually of everything that we've done, and I think it's really important, it's important to stay safe. It's important to keep socially distant from people as far as you can. But I really accept that people who require personal care, that's going to be difficult. But I would just say to everyone, just think how you would feel if you don't get the care and how ill you could be. And then, what we're trying to do is to keep everybody well. The last thing we all want to do is to be in a hospital, really. I know we said if you need to go to a hospital, go to a hospital, but we don't, if we don't have to be in a hospital, for any reason, we don't want to go there. So.
Well, no, I mean, one thing I would like to ask you about, and it's a horrible thing to have to think about, but if someone was to get COVID-19, obviously the advice is very different if you are caring for a child or if you're caring for an adult. So could you just tell us a little bit about the reality of going to hospital with a child or an adult with COVID-19? And I imagine it's particularly worrying if you're caring for an adult, so therefore you might not be able to accompany them onto a COVID-19 ward. And are there any things people can do or should be bearing in mind just to prepare themselves in the, let's hope, very unlikely event? But it's always good to be prepared for any eventuality.
No, you're absolutely right. The other thing is that you're right about who would be allowed to go into hospital with you. So in the awful event that somebody should be admitted to hospital and to a COVID ward as an adult, they will not be allowed visitors or in the normal sense. That is changing from area to area and hospital to hospital, but basically you should expect that if you have to be admitted, you will not be allowed visitors. And actually, I can also say that if you're admitted for a non-COVID reason at the moment, you will not be allowed visitors as a matter of course. So however, if you are a child, that's slightly different. And again, it will depend on your local area. So it might be good to just know, if you're worried, to just know what your local hospital's policy is. And you could always contact them just to check. But what I would say to anybody who is concerned that might happen to them is to be prepared. So, just have a think about, if you were to be in that position, what would you need to make yourself as comfortable and as calm as possible? So, for example, if you use a device to communicate, is it named? Are there instructions typed out somewhere that you could pack to sort of give, indicate what your wishes would be, and how to use things and how to communicate with you if, for example, your device you aren't able to use your device. Do you have spare batteries for your device? Are they somewhere that they could quickly be put in a bag? It's those kind of sort of practical preparations that I think, if you make, it's one of those things, hopefully you never ever have to use them.
You never need it. It's classic thing, isn't it? The more you plan for something, the less likely it is to happen.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I guess additionally, trying to prepare for the NHS workers wearing masks. So if someone's lip reading as well, I know a couple of people asked questions about that earlier, is just to think through the practicalities of that. If you lip read, you obviously, you might need to write down, just, yeah.
What I would say is
most people are, to be honest.
I would say that, the NHS staff who are wearing this awful protective gear are very conscious of communication, and there are speech and language therapists who are being drafted in to try and support. But, I suspect they are few and far between. But I think I think the more you can do to just think about, well, if I was in that situation, how would I want my life to be, and what would I need, and what do I need to have prepared so that I can let everybody that is caring for me know how I wish to be communicated with, who my important contacts and next of kin, and who do I want them to keep informed about my condition or whatever. Just make sure that's all there, I would say.
I saw somewhere online, one lady had made a sort of laminated crib sheet almost, and had literally kind of sort of stapled it to something in hospital, so that I think she had instructed it was stuck on the headboard, which I just thought was fantastic. It's laminated so they can wipe it down, but it's right there next to her head in hospital.
Well, we have in lots of hospitals the "What Matters to You" board on the headboard, but the problem with that is that in an emergency or in a busy time, it's not always necessarily filled in. So if you've got something, you can say, here's who I am and here's what you need to know about me. It's the same with things like preparing a list of what drugs you take if you take medication and things like that. So very just have a think, it would be my advice.
Someone here, Facebook user, has said, is that the same for people under the Adults Without Capacity Act?
Potentially it might be.
Presumably it is about admission. I'm assuming that
yes.
question,
No, I'm thinking about, is it about visitors and admission? And I'm saying potentially it might be because it's an infection control issue, and not having people in. This is COVID related. So if somebody is diagnosed with COVID-19, then it is unlikely that visitors will be allowed. But what I'm saying is this is slightly variable depending where you are in the country. Yes. So if you are concerned, I would encourage you to contact your local NHS and ask them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But hopefully it doesn't happen. I mean, this is what I'm talking about is only if you are diagnosed with COVID. So the best way to ensure that it doesn't happen is to stay clear and not catch COVID.
Yeah. And we must remember that the chances are very unlikely, and they are particularly unlikely if you're taking all the correct measures, which I'm sure people are. Now, there's another question here I'm just going to show. I might have to read the rest of it out. I'm in a wheelchair. My daughter's registered as a young carer for me. My husband has still got to go to work. He's a key worker, so I can't go outdoors with my children to get fresh air. Was it only possible to go out with one person? Scared to go out in case people come too close to us. My goodness, you've got a lot going on and a lot of things to consider there. Thank you for getting in touch and asking the question. So she's in a wheelchair. Her daughter is registered as a young carer. Husband still got to go to work as a key worker, and she's concerned, I do see, about going outside to get fresh air. Or is it possible to go out with one person?
It should be possible to go out with one person if you would normally do that. You can go out as a family unit, or you can go out with one person. Whatever suits you. I think the thing about, I'm worried about people getting too close. That's the responsibility for the whole population. And actually, in my experience, people are being, well, certainly where I live, people are respecting that social distancing and not coming too close. So we're very good at queuing 2 meters apart and avoiding people in the car parks, or when we go for a walk, there's a big wide berth that people take.
We all step around.
We all step around and smile at each other. It's very important to smile at each other and say good morning and all the rest of it. But all I can say is that it just reiterates the importance of all of us in the population taking responsibility for staying away from people, because it's sometimes very difficult to identify who might be vulnerable and who might be feeling vulnerable. It doesn't always show. So it's really important for all of us to keep that social distancing. But I all I would say to the person who says, I'm worried about going out with my daughter as a young carer, just try. Why don't you try it? Just try it in your local area, just for a little bit, just to see how you feel, and take, little steps before, you don't have to go out for a whole hour, and you don't have to go far.
I would also say, if you think people are coming too close, just politely ask them to step away. You have a right to go outside and exercise. You have a right to go out for a walk, and you have a right to do that safely. And if you think people aren't respecting the boundaries, then just you can very nicely just ask them to step away. Or if they don't respond when you ask them politely, ask them slightly less politely. But don't not go outside because you fear other people not respecting the rules. I hope that's helpful. I think she's Laura Ann. If that was you, Laura Ann, you poor thing, you've got a lot to think about there. You must be, difficult time. Now, what else? I'm just going to quickly look at my crib list here. I know the other thing I wanted to ask you about, I don't think we've got a question about this yet, but so under lockdown, the children who normally access your services and support, some obvious things that people are missing out on, education, equipment, education, if you are typically either in mainstream school, but you're statemented, so you have a one-to-one, or you go to a specialist school and it's very hard for a parent or a carer to replicate specialist education. I know how hard it is to replicate mainstream education for an 11 and 13-year-old. Hats off to all the teachers out there. But if you're a parent or carer who's suddenly trying to give that to your child, it's very challenging. Have you got any advice on just really specifically on the sort of special education front as well?
The honest answer is not a lot, but in terms of our experience with families, my real advice is, don't set yourself too high targets. We are not teachers, we are parents, and it's really important to remember that your relationship with your child is more important at this point than necessarily whether they're fulfilling whichever stage of the curriculum that they might need to do. Everybody is struggling, and some people are struggling far more than others. Please don't beat yourself up about it. If there are, we have a Facebook group that a lot of mums are on, and dads, talking about the challenges of homeschooling, and it is a challenge. There are good days and there are bad days. Yeah, and really, it's more important that mentally and your well-being is looked after than you're not being required to deliver the curriculum. So we're all doing our best, and that's all we can do. And I've been having some very funny conversations about bribery. It's a good one. Yes, you can go and play your electronic games if you do X, Y, and Z. Or actually, let's have an afternoon off. Let's put a film on and watch that instead. Is just taking the pressure cooker off. Particularly the families we see, they've got enough. Everybody's got so many pressures at the moment, and actually, worrying about, are you delivering the education curriculum to your child? If we're all doing our best, then I'm sure that's absolutely fantastic and well done. And thank you.
And once again, can I just say big shout out to all the teachers out there who do this day in, day out. I've only got 2 children, not 32, and there have been some tense moments, I can assure you. The episode yesterday of the bald eagle with the toilet rolls will haunt me for a while. Just a couple of comments people have said. I've been taking my mum out in her wheelchair, and people are being very good at keeping clear, moving off pavement, etc. We don't go far, but it really helps. We had to ask one person to move, but he was just being too friendly. I know a lot of wheelchair users suffer from this helpful person syndrome, when they think you definitely want their help, you definitely want them to come push you, and generally you're absolutely fine and you don't. So if anyone is
that's lovely though. That's really lovely, because that's been my experience where I live, that people are genuinely friendly. They are keeping their social distance, and this is you see, here's someone else who's just come up. We found the same when we're taking Ashton out in his wheelchair. People are respectful, and I think just say to anybody who's worried about going out, just try it really close to your home if you can, and see how it makes you feel.
Thank you to those of you just for adding those little comments. That's really reassuring. I think it's quite reassuring to hear from other people in similar situations rather than just hearing from Stephanie and I necessarily. David's question from Fiona McLeod. Yes, about the adults without capacity act. So we did answer that question earlier, but Fiona McLeod, I know, looks after you and her brother, who is an adult, and no doubt is an adult with that is under that act. But I hope we've answered that question. If not, please ping back on and sort of ask another question. Now, the other thing is equipment. Depending on how long lockdown lasts, I'm guessing there's going to be a situation where children particularly are growing out of their wheelchairs, or where they didn't need a hoist at the beginning of lockdown, now it has become necessary. Are there still people out there providing practical support in terms of equipment, or is that just a case of having to wait it out? If
I'm honest, it's one of those things that I think everybody went into a knee-jerk reaction and stopped. And now what we're finding is that there are, people are looking at how do we re-implement services. So, for example, at Cerebral Palsy Scotland, we are looking at how do we go back to hands-on services, face-to-face services, and it's about sourcing PPE, and there's issues with that because obviously care homes, NHS, personal carers need it at the moment more than us. But similarly with other community services, that people are looking at, what can be restarted, if you like. So that's back to my encouragement to if you have an issue. So we know families where children have grown out of splints and all those kind of issues. Contact your local OT or whoever it is that you normally speak to, and that would be the first step. So I can't sit here and tell you that all around the country those services are back up. They're absolutely not at the moment. But what I do know is that there are teams who, when an issue is highlighted to them, they are making sure that they're addressed. So don't feel just because you're not going to your normal appointments that people aren't there to help you.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Someone here said, I know Prism are still up and running. I said I would rather wait though. Yes,
I think that's fair enough. That's absolutely fair enough.
But if you can't wait and you need the equipment, ask for it.
It's one of those. It's one of those things about what do you need to stay well, and if you need help to stay well, then contact who you would normally contact.
Yeah, they've got another question here. Another useful comment. Physios and OT are still up and running in my area too. Fantastic. They have assured me they will have full PPE if we need them, as my son has so much equipment.
Well, that's wonderful, because that just absolutely illustrates what I'm saying. And I think it's really important for everybody to be reassured that if you do need people to help you, they will be there. So
help is out there. So that was Rochelle who was asking that. Thank you, Rochelle. That's really useful. And I guess, again, it may well depend on your area. So it's just a matter of asking the question. And really good to know that they will have full equipment.
We're finding, I'm just to fill in Scotland, we are finding that quite a lot of children's teams might have been redeployed to adult services, but that is being... So again, depending which area you're in, might depend who you speak to. So the normal person that you speak to might not be there, but there will be some form of cover or something. And again, I'd say to anybody in Scotland, if you're worried, contact us at Cerebral Palsy Scotland. And we'll see how we can help.
I'm sure everyone knows this, but most organisations are working on a skeleton staff. Lots of people are doing the job they don't normally do. So there's you may just have to be particularly patient and realise that the person you're speaking to doesn't normally
And that's the same within the
NHS.
that's in the same within the NHS and in local councils as well. Yeah.
Thank you. I know some trusts are offering video conference calls too. We've had weekly ones. They can check positioning, etc. Amazing.
Well, that's the other thing. Some, you if you contact the people you normally contact, they might deliver some help in a different way, i.e. video conferencing calls. So we're all just learning to adapt.
And
really.
I'm imagining that I have to just sort of imagine what this is like, because I don't live this, but I'm imagining for some children, having somebody coming into your home with a mask and all the equipment might be more alarming than seeing a familiar face on a screen. So actually it might be the case where that actually might be more reassuring. I imagine for some children, the masks, etc., might be slightly alarming.
I think this is back to explaining the situation to children, and explaining why we're all having to dress like this or whatever. So one of our health boards actually up here has produced a little guide. So it might be that your area might have a kind of fun, explaining to children why we're having to do what we're doing. I know that the therapists at Cerebral Palsy Scotland are talking about, well, we'll just have to start dressing up, won't we? And I can imagine, I mean, I'm hoping it's not going to be Darth Vader that are turning up, because but I can see we ran a superheroes group for children last in one of the holidays last year, and I can see that we'll have a few superheroes turning up in full PPE when we resume therapy. I think
I love that.
Yeah,
any excuse for some fancy dress. I'm very keen. This user has said, this is really good, useful advice. Thank you, Stephanie. It certainly is. This is absolute gold. I just think we are approaching, we've been nearly on for an hour, so if anyone has any last questions, please fire them over quick. I'm just going to check.
And what I would say to anybody is that if you think of a question afterwards, info@cpscot.org.uk, and somebody will answer it from us. So, please feel free to be in touch.
Thank you. And like I said, we will, if anyone's new and they've just hopped on and they missed this earlier, we will share the links to both the CP Scotland website and also to the coffee morning, which takes place on your Facebook page, because I know someone particularly
it takes place on Zoom, but you can click in from our Facebook page. Yeah,
from the Facebook page. Amazing. Yeah.
I think our Facebook page may still be called Bobath Scotland, because we've just rebranded. So and Facebook are being particularly irritating about changing our name, but never mind. That's one of those admin irritants that we have.
I know all about the irritants of working with Facebook. One thing I'd like to ask you very quickly, and there are a couple of things that just appeared which we'll come back to, is there were some absolute horror stories banding around on the internet of parents or carers of children who had received letters from the GP saying, do you agree that if your child is to contract COVID-19 that you won't take them to hospital, and that you accept that they would not receive a ventilator if there was a shortage? This just seems absolutely appalling, and I wondered if that
this is outrageous. I think this is an example of rabbits in headlights, and people doing things that they're just not thinking of the consequences of their actions. I know in Scotland, the Health Secretary, the Cabinet Secretary for Health, absolutely stamped down on that and said nobody should be sent a letter like this. DNR conversations and things like that should be held at the right time in the right environment, and it should be a conversation. It shouldn't be a letter and sign here. Similarly, again, decisions about whether you want to be taken into hospital or not, because there are, this is a very personal, very individual decision. And these are conversations that should be had within a supportive group. So if anybody has received a letter like that.
Yeah, someone here says this was awful. It was very upsetting. Of course it was. I cannot imagine anything more upsetting. I mean,
no. And the only thing I can point you towards that I hope will reassure you is that the British Medical Association published their advice on treatment during COVID. And I can absolutely assure you that nobody in the UK will be disbarred from treatment or not given treatment because of a protected characteristic. So, for example, disability is a protected characteristic. So just because you are disabled does not mean you will not be treated. And that's very clear in the BMA guidelines. And if you go on to, again, I think there's a link on our website, but if you go on to the BMA and look at COVID ethics, it's very clear there. There is a discussion about, and doctors have these discussions all the time about, is the treatment I'm going to give you, is it going to do you more harm than good? Now, that's not a COVID only issue. That's
the same if you were going to hospital with any other health condition. Yeah,
exactly. So it might be that these conversations are a good conversation to have, and it's always better to have them when you're well and you're not, it's not, you're not in the moment. But I can really reassure people, and I hope the BMA advice underpins it, is I love seeing your children in the background. Welcome to the virtual world.
No.
Anyway, just to reassure.
So that's William.
No, that's life.
We're discussing this really sensitive issue. I'm so sorry, but thank you so much for reassuring everyone, because that is well, I mean, it was absolutely horrifying, and I cannot imagine how upsetting it was. And thank you for reassuring everyone. I think
in Scotland, when those some letters did go out, but I have to say that they shouldn't have gone out. And the health secretary has very firmly sort of almost ticked off whoever, anybody that would have sent them. I think it was an example of the system trying to get everything organized really quickly. And we just, we've moved on. We've realized that, COVID isn't like that.
No. So, well, thank you. Thank you so much. And just a couple of things I want to share here. Visuals are really helpful to explain things to children, pictures of what is going to happen. Thank you. Yeah, that's really useful advice. And
that's a good point, actually, because we always send people out advice before they come in for sessions. So I can see adding visuals to let you know what to expect is that's a really helpful point. Thank you.
And if you can see and you understand that an NHS worker wearing a mask is actually a lovely hero who's going to help you, it's not alarming in any way. And another one here said our son's school can email social stories using simple pictures to explain COVID and PPE use. That is fantastic. It's amazing. All of these schools and services are just reacting, and so fast. There is so much out there. I think what's hard.
And the lovely thing is,
where to go.
No, but the lovely thing is that everybody is sharing them. So, we're putting up on our sites quite a lot of links that other people are sharing with us that are useful. So, you were talking earlier about things that we'll learn from this time. I mean, sharing information and understanding that it's not about us, and actually how can we get the right information to the right people and help people the best way possible is actually where I'm seeing so many people coming from, whether it's NHS or local councils or schools or charities. Everybody's just trying to support. How do we get this right? How do we navigate it?
There is just a phenomenal amount of support I see online, parent to parent, peer-to-peer advice. It's just absolutely phenomenal. The only thing I would say around that and or ask you about is just be aware that some of the stories you see flying around are not always the most accurate and correct. If you read something very alarming, don't necessarily assume that is applicable to you or is correct advice. Do just make sure you go back and check with a credible source, because it's very easy. Fake news,
we're trying to we're trying to do an audit every week. So we're sending around a CP sort of curated audit of the week's topics or the week's advice or the week's news. So again, if you sign on to our newsletter, you'll get the CP weekly edit of here's what we think in Scotland.
You know, no doubt, yes, it needs to be weekly because the advice is changing. Not just weekly, but every day. And I'm sure you're aware of that with your work. Of the Neurological Conditions Committee. Stephanie, I can't thank you enough. That has been so helpful. Like we've hit an hour. It's hard to believe. It just flies by. Thank you. Very sorry about the interruption of my son, who urgently needed to find shuttlecocks to play badminton. So I
think that was a highlight, actually.
He's taking his 1 hour's exercise very seriously. He seems to do quite a lot of exercise and not an awful lot of work. I'm just going to show this. If a parent who requires assistance with physiotherapy support and yourself as a physiotherapy assistant at SEN school colleges asked to work at their home and not have PPE equipment, I'm worried about living with my parents who have high risk medical conditions to COVID. What would you suggest?
Well, I think that we've had a lot of inquiries actually in a similar vein on this. And nobody should be asked to do something that is not within the guidelines. So I would suggest that actually as a first point of call, you access the government guidelines on PPE and personal care. And if your employer is not following those guidelines, then actually they are in breach of the health and safety at work regulations. So again, we have signposted various people to the health and safety at work regulations, and I've done a blog. It was published this week again on our it's on our website, but around employment issues. And if you do not feel comfortable, you need to speak to your employer, and your employer needs to ensure that you are safe at work, and that they are following guidelines. So again, this is something that I suspect will be changing in the coming weeks, because you will have heard on the news conferences and things about people asking about how we're going to get back to work.
And there's an appetite for it, isn't there? All of a sudden in the last week, I noticed that there is a lot of talk about resuming services.
And I think we all realise we can't live in a sort of limbo forever. But what we mustn't do is to take our foot off the brake so much that we relax so much and we end up in a second peak, is where we're all worried about. So it is important, and again, employers will be required to ensure that you are safe at your work. So
the one thing I would just add to, I'm sorry, I wish I knew your name, the person who's asked this question here that's on the screen. Do message us. We spoke yesterday to an employment lawyer who may be able to give you some very specific advice on what your rights are not wishing to return to work. So if you feel you need some more advice, more specific sort of legal advice, please do message us at BundleBean on the Facebook page, and we will direct that inquiry to Dave Plotkin. Last thing I'm going to show, because Stephanie needs to go back to her day job. Great advice, and only taking bite-sized bits of COVID-related news, as it isn't good for mental health. Agree. I think that is applicable to all of us. I think at the start we all read, I know I did, I read every single bit of news. Oh, that is Daniel saying that. Thank you, Daniel. Sorry, I'm just going to switch the phone off.
Somebody gave me a tip at the beginning, and I feel I've been sort of drowning in policy advice and things, because we've been helping write some and things like that. But somebody said to me, pick whatever news channel or news form that you like best, and it might be on the radio, or it might be Boris and the Boffins at 5 o'clock, or it might, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Whatever bit of news, it might be a newspaper or online, and pick that and go and look at that at the same time every day, and don't look at anything else. And I thought I quite like that. I haven't necessarily followed it, but I wish I had.
Stephanie, I cannot thank you enough. That is absolutely amazing. I'm sorry for taking up so much of your time, but thank you. I know you must be stretched. I cannot imagine. Skeleton staff, and no doubt you, like all of us, are doing 50 different jobs at once. And I know you're also a mum, so no doubt, like me, you are also stepping off screen to make things out of toilet rolls.
No, I'm not really worrying about the curriculum, to be honest.
It's all right. I keep saying to my husband, he'll catch up.
Exactly.
He's having a whale of a time.
My priority is to get the centre back up and running. Actually,
of course.
That's what we all really want to do. So,
well, all I'll say, my last thing to say to everyone watching is, stay fit and healthy. And at 11:45. We've got a live workshop. It is an adapted Joe Wicks workout. I don't know about you, but we did the Joe Wicks workout with great enthusiasm twice. We haven't done it again, but I know some people are doing it every day, and it's incredible. Hannah from BundleBean Physio has adapted the Joe Wicks workout for children of all physical abilities. You can do it standing up, you can do it sitting down in a chair, you can do it from your wheelchair, you can do it lying down on a mat, you can do it with your mum or your dad supporting you. That is at 11:45 on the page live. So in echoing Stephanie's earlier comments about the importance of staying fit and well and healthy, eating good food, taking exercise,
keeping moving.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is something we've got on offer here today. I know there is a wealth of similar things. Morning, ladies. This is amazing. Well, thank you. I'm so glad it's been helpful. And I can see already that Sam is beavering away, sharing links to Cerebral Palsy Scotland website and all the resources that they offer. Stephanie, thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. And it's great. I love this conference. I think it's great. So well done, Emily, and everybody at BundleBean. It's been
looking
brilliant.
Forward to the weekend, I must say, but we've had a lovely time. Stephanie, thank you. Speak to you soon. Stay safe.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.